Welcome back to Thompson's Coins, where today we're taking a look at some fascinating coins with some very interesting backstories. We've got a bit of a broad range to look at today. I decided to just take a few examples of some of the interesting coins that have come through this week, and we'll take a look and hopefully I can give you some interesting stories. I can confirm the one at the end is a personal anecdote and I think is quite amusing, so stick around for that one. We'll start with an interesting coin from the American Mint. This is, it's very interesting. It's a depiction of a UFO on top of a pyramid. So the coin is a representation of the theory that the pyramids of Egypt were not actually created by humans. It was the work of UFOs and extraterrestrials. And one of the interesting aspects to this coin, and it's something that I've always enjoyed about some of the unique and sort of eccentric modern coins, is the addition of a physical component. And in this instance, we have some physical limestone from Egypt. And I think it appeals to anyone if you're like me and you like things that are a little unusual, and it serves as an interesting talking point. So whenever you're showing off your collection to friends and family and things like that, you have a very interesting talking point in that you have a physical piece of Egypt with a coin depicting an unusual theory, let's say, about the creation of the pyramids. I can't say for sure how they got there. I wasn't around for their creation, but this is just one of many theories, and it makes for an interesting coin, I think. Just on that, it sort of reminds me of these Stardust of the Universe coins. These are recreations of the impact zone from where meteorites have landed on Earth, and they also feature a small piece of the meteorite from that impact site. Things like that I just think are kind of cool and a little interesting. Probably a little adjacent to your conventional coin collecting. These are sort of unusual collectibles in their own right, I think, but something different. Moving on, we have a 1 ounce silver round. And if you are interested in silver and you've gone down the rabbit hole to learn a little bit about it, there's every chance that you've come across two iconic characters in the silver story. And those two characters are the Hunt brothers. Now, in the 1980s, they made an attempt to corner the silver market. The story goes that they had control over approximately 1/3 of the privately available silver. And as a result, the price increased significantly. It got up around $50 an ounce and then suddenly crashed significantly when they were unable to meet some margin calls, and subsequently they were charged with market manipulation charges. So on one side of the coin, we've got the brothers Nelson and William Hunt, and then flipping over, you've got a silver chart there depicting the spike that they were allegedly responsible for in the markets back in the day. Moving on, we have an incredibly cool coin. I think I've made it very clear over the past few videos with characters like Jimi Hendrix and some of the AC/DC releases. This is a really cool Motorhead coin. So 2025 marks the 50th anniversary of Motorhead. Unfortunately, Lemmy, the singer and bassist, is no longer with us, so we're not going to be seeing any new material out of them. But this is just an incredibly cool coin. You've got the iconic Motorhead logo there with a bit of an enhancement, a bit of gilding on the text Motorhead, as well as the horns there. And then flipping over to the obverse, we have the coat of arms and the Barbados, $5. The total mintage of this coin is 1975, so a reference to 1975. That is the year that Motorhead was founded. It was founded by Lemmy after leaving the band Hawkwind. So he went from one very influential band to arguably one of the most influential bands in rock and roll and heavy music. So yeah, I don't need to go on and on. I could go for a while because I'm a big fan of Motorhead, but there you go. A very cool coin. One for the rock and roll and heavy metal enthusiasts out there. Next up, we have some medallions. So these are not coins. These are not the type of thing that are really popular with coin collectors because they are just a souvenir, basically, that type of thing. Or if you just have an interest in the subject matter, it makes for a nice display. So we have some WWE legends depicted on these medallions. This is the first edition, and I believe it's the first series, so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a few more characters down the line. So without further ado, let's take a look. First up, we have Hulk Hogan. Anyone that's been watching wrestling from back in the day, you will be very familiar with him, an icon of the sport. Then we have Stone Cold Steve Austin. Fun fact about him, the way he got the name Stone Cold, it was actually his wife gave him a cup of tea and said, you better drink that before it goes stone cold. And he decided that would be a very fitting name for his character. Next up, we have The Rock, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And if you had have told me that when I was watching him back when I was a kid, doing all of the outlandish things that he was doing in the world of wrestling, if you told me that one day I'd be driving around in my car with my 2-year-old daughter listening to him singing Disney songs, I would have said you're crazy. But here we are, 2025. Who would have picked it? Then we have The Undertaker, an absolute, and again, massive legend in the franchise, a very, very iconic character. Then Bret the Hitman Hart, if anyone knows about him, he was an absolute star back in the day. Unfortunately, his career got cut short with an injury, and he still holds on to a grudge about that to this day. So a bit of a bummer how his career ended. And then John Cena, who is still a wrestler today. Not one that I know a lot about. I was more interested in wrestling back. I'm not that old, but for me, it was about 20 years ago that I was right into it. So he wasn't as much of a character. So there's, references to some of the older and some of the newer wrestlers as well. On the obverse of each of these medallions, you have the modern WWE logo, which stands for World Wrestling Entertainment. Okay, now let's move on to the main event for the video. We have the coloured Brumby coin from the Perth Mint. Jennifer McKenna has done this design, and she's done an incredible job. These coins were so popular and incredibly difficult to get your hands on when they were first released. The only way I was able to get my hands on one for my personal collection was actually by going to the Perth Mint in person. So they were very, very highly sought after. And I'm delighted to let you know that I've got 5 of these that are encapsulated by NGC. So NGC is sort of the alternative to PCGS. So they're another slabbing company based in the US that authenticate and attribute numerical grades to coins. What we have here is an MS70, which is mint state, and 70 is the highest number that you can get to on the grading scale. So, as you'd hope for a brand new coin, it's perfect, and these are very, very popular just in the box, and these coins also will come with the box, but they've been encapsulated by NGC and have that 70 grading. This was a coin that originally came out just as a standard bullion coin, and it was really nice. The Brumby series has always been incredibly popular, and a lot of the designs often depict a lot of motion, which is understandable and I guess to be expected from wild horses. But this one really sort of went above and beyond with the depiction of lightning in the background there, and in the foreground you can see it running on what appears to be a bit of an outback, desolate landscape. Possibly even, and this is just a theory, it could even be a dry riverbed or something like that. It sort of has the appearance that it could be something like that. Who knows? Let me know your theories in the comments. And then on the obverse, obviously, we've got King Charles III and the $1 denomination. But now let me tell you my story, my anecdote about Brumbies. So I have actually had a physical encounter out in the wild with a Brumby. And before I go on, the name Brumby actually allegedly comes from one of the early settlers by the name of James Brumby. And in the early 1800s, he was being transferred from New South Wales down to Van Diemen's Land, modern-day Tasmania, and he let his horses go, and they became known as Brumby's horses, shortened down to Brumbies, which is how you get the term Brumby. Just a little bit of etymology for you. But back to the story. So, back in the day, I was a lot younger, and I did the Larapinta Trail, which is a fairly well-known hike in Australia. It's quite challenging as well. It's the sort of thing that you should generally train for. I did quite a lot of training, and I was also not very well versed in hiking. So when hiking, people often prepare. They bring a lot of lightweight cooking equipment, things like that. For context, I brought my one of my pots from home, from the kitchen, and my pack, I think it weighed about 30 kilos in the end, which is not ideal when you're hiking in, I guess, outback Australia. You're sort of hiking up steep inclines with sandy terrain. It's quite challenging at times, and I just was not very well prepared. But we carry on. So night one, we camped atop a bluff, which was a large, it was sort of like the top of a mountain, and it was incredibly windy. My small tent that I had, the poles fell down in the middle of the night. It felt like there was a cyclone on the top of the mountain. So I wasn't off to a good start. The next morning, I woke up, and this was with my dad and both of my brothers, and a number of other members of my dad's walking group. So in the morning, they were all getting ready, brushing their teeth, just taking forever to get ready for the day. So my eldest brother and I decided, there's nothing left to see here. Let's take off. Without a map, without a compass, there were signs, there are little arrows that tell you the general direction that you should be heading in. So we thought, we'll be fine. We're incredibly impatient. Let's just take off. We'll see you at the next campsite. We took off really early in the morning, and I think it was supposed to be about 5 hours of walking. We took off, and it must have been about 7 hours, and we set off at a really, really quick pace. And we thought, there's no way that we have not hit the campsite yet. And there was a point where we ended up almost rock climbing. We were rock climbing up the side of a steep incline. And we thought, this is supposed to be a hike. This doesn't make sense. We didn't hear at any point that we'd be rock climbing. We stopped, we took a break, both realized that we'd run out of water and it was incredibly hot. We were sitting down and I said, I'm tired, but I'm getting pins and needles in my legs. This is crazy. I think I'm starting to get heat exhaustion or something like that. And then my brother pointed down and said, yeah, you're sitting on an ant's nest. And I was covered in ants, getting bitten all over my legs. And safe to say, we weren't having the best of times. We decided to backtrack because we figured eventually in a few hours we'll meet up with the original group once they take off and meet up with us. So we sat down. I didn't have the energy to prepare a campfire or anything like that to get my my pot and pan out to make 2-minute noodles. So we sat there eating some dry noodles, waiting for everyone else to turn up, absolutely exhausted, fed up with the whole experience. And it was also off-peak season, so there were no other hikers on the trail. And at some point, we were sitting there and I said, I think I can hear them off in the distance, but it sounds like they're moving pretty quick. And my brother sprung up and said, get ready to run. We might need to move at a moment's notice here. And I thought, oh, geez, what now? I've been covered in ants. We've been walking all day. We've got no water. This is a terrible experience. And he said, I think they're wild Brumbies coming. And I think at that point I thought, oh, gee, I might just try and shelter under this log. I don't think we're going to be able to outrun something like this. And sure enough, very shortly thereafter, about 10 meters from where we were perched atop our little log, a group of about 5 wild Brumbies came blasting out of the bushland, and they were moving unbelievably fast. It is not the sort of thing, and I think it's obvious. It is obvious now, telling the story, but at the time, I think when you're a little tired, you've been out in the sun all day, there is part of you that thinks I might be able to outrun a wild Brumby. But I can now confirm, having now seen them out in the wild, they are incredibly large, very, very powerful animals, and they move quickly. So that's my little Australian Brumby story for you. It is the one and only time I've seen them out in the wild. I think that trip, I think, marked the conclusion of my days of wilderness exploration and hiking in the outback Australia. But it was interesting. Every time I see one of these Brumby coins, I chuckle to myself, and I can just think back to that time where I dumped my 30-kilo pack on the ground to take a break with my brother, and we saw them up close and personal, and at some point thought that we may have been able to outrun them or jump out of the way as they came blasting out of the clearing. So there you go. That's Matt Thompson's story time. If you enjoy hearing stories of some of my adventures, please let me know. Otherwise, I can keep it strictly focused on the coins and the designs themselves. But like I said earlier, this is a beautiful coin. I've got 5 examples of these that have been graded MS70 by NGC. Also, I've got a couple of the other coins that I've highlighted here today. And I must say, I quite enjoy highlighting a variety of coins. You can probably tell by this video, each one of these coins and the medallions that I've highlighted today have a bit of a connection to me, and I think they're the type of thing that I really enjoy displaying in the store because I get to have these conversations with people about all of these unusual things, but it's also a lot of fun to have something a little different, not conventional collector's coins. So if your main interest is the old historically significant coins, don't panic, we do highlight those on this channel as well. Speaking of which, please subscribe if you enjoy collecting, the greatest hobby in the world. Alternatively, you can also visit us here at the Thompson's Coins headquarters. We're located at Shop 8 in the Boronia Mall. We're open from Tuesday to Friday, 10 till 4, as well as Saturdays from 10 till 3. Also, you can find us online at thompsonscoins.com.au. Each of the coins and medallions highlighted in this video will be in a little link in the description. That's it for now. Thanks for checking out this video and seeing some of the interesting things that come through the shop here. We'll see you soon.